Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Laid Off Legends podcast, where we come together to talk about layoff stories and relevant expertise with the focus on finding inspiration, encouragement, and guidance for the laid off community and beyond. I am your host, Leo, a former principal PM that was laid off from Microsoft last October. I am delighted to host another episode today with another special guest. Steve, welcome to the Laid Off Legends podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's so
Really
great to
excited to
have
be
you.
here.
Now, for those of our listeners who are not familiar with your work, Steve is a dynamic and results-driven HR professional with over a decade of expertise in organizational and leadership development. He's renowned for translating strategic visions into operational success, fostering a culture of continuous improvement through agile methodologies, and delivering measurable results in employee engagement and business operations. He is a strategic thinker who excels in designing and implementing scalable solutions and focuses on driving organizational excellence and cultivating high-performance teams. His journey has taken him through some of the largest companies in the world, notably Intel for almost 13 years, and now Accenture, where he is a learning and design consultant delivery manager. I came across Steve on some of his posts, and they had a sense of leadership, clarity, and forward thinking while being grounded in this really, really critical empathy, inclusiveness, and respect. And so, Steve, I really loved that about your posts. And when I saw that, I was like, I have to reach out. And thank you for being so open to chat. I would love to get first your impressions on this initiative and this experience and what you've seen so far.
What you're doing, it lays deep in my heart. I think it's very important work to help other people go through this. The work environment right now, it's very agile. It's moving very fast. We need to adapt as individuals. We need this kind of connections for us to be able to learn more, to listen to stories of people, to get into those stories, for us to move forward into our next career.
There's so much power in these stories, and we get to learn from other people. We get to be inspired by their journey. Okay, so let's ground ourselves. So, what is learning and development design?
It's the ability to create educational programs or training experiences and development opportunities to meet business needs. It has to do with the ability to analyze what the needs are and to be able to translate those needs into something that's feasible for employees, for them to be able to grow into the next career levels, right? Whether if it's a job specific or if it's a career path, right? So it's the ability to translate those into something that's actually consumable for people.
So, it sounds like your role, primary role, is to look at the need that the company has and then try and match that. Does our company have the skill set to actually move forward and accomplish those objectives?
That is correct. We help companies translate those needs into something that they can actually execute for them to be able to take people to the next level.
You must be super busy these days because there's so much change on the horizon. It's really interesting how you help people prepare for the future.
Exactly. Beyond the busyness of this role, it has to do with it's the technology and how everything is moving very fast. And how do we help people learn and adapt to that speed and the reality of the world? Because that's how everything is moving right now.
Can you help us understand that link between the organizational and the personal? Do the same principles apply?
Yeah, they do. It's an interesting game between the what and the how. It's trying to understand what is needed and how we're going to get there. We need to understand what is it that we want to do or what is it that we need to learn for us to be able to get to that how. How am I going to be able to learn what I need? This is why it's so linked to the organizational piece because it doesn't have to do with it with the job specific. It has to do with everything you do in life. What is it that I want to learn to get to where I want to be? And then you define the how. And that's exactly how it's done in the organizational level. We go into this need analysis to understand what is it that's needed. And then we will define and design how we're going to get there.
I like what you said there around what do we need to learn to get to where we want to go. That sense of vision, it sounds like that is defined first, and then gap analysis says, okay, great. For us to get there, we need to learn these things. How does the organization start to set that vision? Where does that come from? And how does that permeate through the organization?
That goes in different levels, whether if it's a market trend that will define it. If we're talking about the engineering space, what is it the engineering? How is engineering transforming? How is the business moving? How is the business behaving? So that we understand what is it that we need to move into that space. A lot of the tech industry, it's thinking forward. So they have to look ahead to understand that. And then that's where the needs analysis would come into the picture. That's when we're going to say, okay, so in 6 years, we need to be here. Let's study the needs or how are our people behaving towards those needs for us to be able to define that how. But that has to be forward thinking all the time. And I don't think that that only applies to specific tech industry. It applies to all industries and to us to in an individual level. Like where do I want to be in 10 years? It takes a brief study of the skills or what the business is offering right now for us to be able to say in 10 years these skills are going to be needed. So I better start preparing right now.
Well, I think this is where trying to draw the analogy between the corporation, the business, and then myself as an individual with the tools that we're seeing releasing almost on a daily basis that are really, for lack of a better word, threatening different industries and different skill sets. How do we squeeze out some of these organizational practices and apply them in our individual journey so that we can be prepared for what's to come?
I think it has to do with our ability to stay up to date with what we're seeing in the business and what's needed towards that. One of the things that I always tell people is have you investigate more of where your role or how your role is going to transform in the next 10 years for you to be able to study that. And it applies to every single role. With the introduction of generative AI and all of the technology that we have today, it's how is my role going to transform in 10 years? And then start preparing for that. How am I going to create a path for that? How am I going to start creating a plan for me to be able to get to that so that when that happens, I'm already prepared? You cannot wait. Corporations don't prepare that way. They prepare ahead. They are not preparing for something that's going to happen in a year. They prepare for something that's going to happen in 6, 10 years.
There was one nugget you mentioned, which was one, decide where you want to go. What is the vision for where you're trying to get to? And then two, there's an inventory that you need to do on your role and your discipline. What is this going to look like in the next 5, 10 years? And is there an assessment that you need to do on yourself saying, where is that skill gap that I have right now with where my role is going to be in X amount of years?
There's online tools that you could do on testing your skills, but it's also about studying and investigating what is it that the business is going to need from me. We're speaking very corporate specific, but if there's an entrepreneur here, how my business could transform in 10 years for me to adapt to what the business is requiring for me as an entrepreneur. So you can go and investigate online and try to test your skills for you to be able to identify. Let's talk about one soft skills like influencing. Influencing will always be needed. What's my level of influencing right now? How do I know how I can improve that? And then find the resources for me to be able to learn how to do that.
One of the interesting things about a layoff is that it stops short. It's not a dead end, but you were driving and suddenly you're not able to move forward.
Mhm.
And to use a very common driving analogy, you now have to, okay, where's my map? How do I reframe and rethink where do I want to go? Do I want to go find another road like this? Or do
Mhm.
I want to turn around and head to somewhere completely different? Do you have any thoughts on how folks, when they arrive at that moment, wow, I'm laid off, how do they start to think about this intentional destination setting or this skill gap that we've been talking about?
One of my mentors once said, the best time to look for a job is when you don't need one. And I think many people don't do that. Many people wait until they need to find a job to do so. A layoff is a very unexpected thing. My recommendation is prior to creating any map, prior to going into any study of that, is to pause for a second, to breathe, and define what is it that I want to do next. Don't let panic overtake everything because when you do that, you're probably going to go into the first option that you have in your hand. And that's not where you should do as an individual. Once you're able to do that, the next big step is what do I have in my core skills? What is it that I have that I mastered? Versus what am I lacking on the market? What's the market offering? And then compare those two. This is kind of like this needs analysis. Find that little point and say, what would it take for me to get to that next level that the market is requiring? In the case you want to continue your career path in the same line, your passions, your academia. If you would like to take a completely different route, for me to get there, what is it that the market is requiring for that step that I want? And how am I going to get there? Whether if it's a master's, whether if it's a certification, because that we're talking about a little more complex road in that scenario. Now, the next step you have to take on that is once you have defined that is how do you adapt your resume, how do you adapt your profile for you to be matching those roles that you want. Study the requisitions, study the skills and the requisitions. How is that translating into my resume, and how can I make a match in there?
One of the things that's coming to me right now is the shift from an organizational perspective to personal. In a lot of the organizations, there is a plan. So you come in, you're a product manager, you're a designer, you're a developer, and there is a path to your success. And whether that's climbing the corporate ladder, getting into different, more complex projects, there's a
Mhm,
plan for you. After a layoff, you have to do this yourself. You're really pushed away from the planned pathway into
mhm,
something that has to be highly individual, highly personalized, highly driven by who you are and what
mhm.
you want to do. Do you have any thoughts around making that mindset shift from there's a path that's laid out for me to here's a path I actually have to create for myself?
You said something that's really important. You said who you are. It's not about who you are, it's about what skills you have. And that doesn't define you as a person. And I think that's really important because that plays with your self esteem. The fact that you're applying to a role and you don't get the role, that doesn't speak of who you are as a person. That only speaks that the company, they saw something that it was not, and that's it. Now, how we prepare for that mentally, it's what's really important. You're going to apply to several jobs, you probably won't get all of those roles. You get one. And that doesn't define the quality of a person that you are. That defines only that they were probably in the interview, they were looking for something different. And this is why it's so important for you to go into those requisitions and study what is it that's needed. Go outside, read, investigate for you to be able to identify what is it that's needed for me. And how do I learn that is what's also important. It's not about, okay, so I'm going to get a certification on this. Is that the best way to learn for you? Are you a kinesthetic learner? Do you need to practice that? How are you going to translate that into something that you can actually enjoy? Which is the other important part. Layoffs are very difficult because it plays with your self-esteem, it plays with the idea of you've been in that path that the corporation has taken you and you have a plan. But all of a sudden, with the layoff, you don't have that. You're out of that. And now you have to do it individually. And this is why it's very important to pause and breathe and say, what do I want to do next? Do I want to continue in the career path I was in the corporation I was? Was that even my comfort zone? And I never thought of anything different because I wasn't that comfort zone. Maybe I should do something different. And then when you define that with peace of mind, then you can start doing those steps of investigating, understanding how those skills are learned. What is it that they need from that skill? I like the example of soft skills because soft skills are something that are not easily trained. Those are things that you learn through experiences. Hard skills are more technical. You take a course, you learn how to do it. And we are in a very pivotal time of a work environment. Hard skills are highly linked to soft skills. The technology right now is very dehumanized. So we start needing those human skills for us to be able to execute the jobs of the future. So how do I become better at that? Those are questions that you have to ask yourself. First of all, identify if it's a hard or a soft skills. And then once you do that, it's what soft skill is needed for me to be successful in that specific job. So that's where I think it's the key.
Are there any pitfalls or landmines that you've seen as people have tried to develop this framework that they should avoid?
Don't think of it as a straight line. It's a mountain and it has ups and downs. And don't be afraid of changing when you're learning through this because that's going to happen. We're humans. We're going to change. So that's the number one. And the same happens in the work environment. There's things that you're going to love about your job. There's things that you're going to hate about your job. But that doesn't generalize the idea of your job and your passions. The other thing is, I think in the theory of development, there's three circles: the academia, which is what we study, the passion, and the actual job that we have. Try to align those circles as much as you can. It's not going to happen all the time. Sometimes you're going to have the work, and the academia is going to go a little far, or the passion is going to be a little far. Always think about trying to connect those three circles as much as possible. What drives my passion? What is it that I enjoy doing? And try to go for that. That doesn't necessarily sometimes align to my academia, and that's okay. And that's where you pause for a second when you go through a layoff and think about what is it that I love doing? You're going to be doing this for 8 hours a day, every day. So you might as well just find that point where you're enjoying what you're.
Sounds like something everybody should be doing, whether you're laid off or not. Really understanding your passions and what drives you, and then how you bring that to work on a regular basis.
Yeah, even in the corporate level, like, a lot of people fall in that space of I'm very comfortable with my job, I'm getting the money that I want, I'm not going to move. Even though you're not liking what you're doing at 100%, or you're probably hating the job, but you're just very comfortable. And this is where managers play a pivotal role on this, is trying to help people define those. That this is where managers become coaches. It's, are you comfortable here? Yes. Do you like what you do? Is that aligned to your passions? No. Okay. How do I help you move to the next level?
How do you introduce discomfort into your journey so that you're always aware of where you are and the skills you need to build?
I call it the spark. It's that thing that you say, I wake up every morning and even though there's parallels of things I hate, I like what I do. I feel driven by this. I feel like I'm doing the right thing. I think people get very comfortable. My personal story goes into my line. I loved my job in my previous company, but I was very comfortable to the point that I was letting the corporation dictate what I wanted. The corporation would say, oh, now you're going to be here, Steven. And I would have been like, I'm doing the job that I want, but this is not what I want in my career. But I'll do it because I'm comfortable. You have to be uncomfortable for you to be comfortable later on. And I think that's something that's the biggest learning for me through this environment that we're living right now. Don't let a corporation dictate where you're going to be just because they're doing a reorg or doing whatever they're doing. You have to define what is it that you want to do and be brave enough to take the next step. Layoffs surprise you in a way that nobody are expecting those things, right? But that in a way is a positive thing because they're pushing you out to do the work that I'm telling you everybody should be doing in the corporations. I emphasize the importance of pausing for a second because there's going to be a moment of panic. There's going to be a moment where you're going to go like, oh, I've been here for 10, 5, 2, 3, whatever years you've been. And you're going to pause for a second and say, and now I'm not there. What am I going to do? Okay, pause for a second. Don't panic. You're going to be okay. Breathe in, breathe out, and define what are those passions? What are those things that when you do them, you're at 100%, you enjoy doing that. Okay, and now when you find out that, then go and investigate how does this translate into a role? And then go and find out what is needed for that role. What are other corporations requiring for that specific role? Read those things and study, and then find out and make a plan on how you're going to get there to be at that level.
I want to go back to comfort for a second. What other behaviors have you observed that people are too comfortable in their roles and they're not really continuing to be on the cutting edge or preparing for the future?
When it becomes automatic, when you become computerized at your job, are you really enjoying your job? Or you're just doing your job? There's a difference between those two. And I think it has to do with quality too. When you start doing a job, there's a lot of detail orientation. I don't want to make a mistake. I want to be on top of everything. I want to learn. Don't ever lose that. When you get comfortable on a job, you do it because I know how to do it. And then it's just that every day, every day. Are you learning something new? Are you getting something out of this? And if you're not learning, and this is why learning and development is so important, you should never stop learning. And you should not be afraid of relearn the things that you've learned in the past because they will never be the same. They will keep transforming. So I think that when you become comfortable, you become very computerized. It's like I do the job, boom, I'm done. And that's every day, every day, every day. Stop for a second. I also think about how people lose. I don't want to call it interest, but it's just like I don't care. Nah, I've been here. I know how to do it. I know I'm not surprised anymore. Those things are red flags. Pay attention to those things and say, well, do I want to do this job? Yes. Okay. How do I learn something new within the job that I'm doing so I can grow my skills? If not, then how do I change my job and look for a different job that challenges me? And that's another word that's really strong, the challenge, the challenging part of it. If it's not challenging me anymore, I probably need to move. I need to find that discomfort of moving into the next step.
Stay hungry, stay foolish. And I think what you just described was you start a role, you're super hungry, you lean in, you're just passionate, and you're just producing impact. And at some point, it kind of dies down. You
Mhm.
stop learning, you stop growing, you stop stretching. What are some of the ways that people can remain hungry?
It has to do with the transformation. How do I transform this into the next level? Let me give you an example. Generative AI, it's now drenching everything. And people are panicking about what if my role is going to disappear? So think about how do I create value over generative AI. I think a lot of people are paying a lot of attention to the intelligence part, but they're forgetting about the artificial part. The human factor of that will always be needed, but we need to transform as a workforce, right? How do I become more efficient at using generative AI? And there's learning that has to happen over there, right? How do I take this to the next level? That should be a question that we ask ourselves every day. I want to talk about this not from the corporate aspect of it, from every aspect of our lives. How do I take this activity to the next level? Think about training. What is the philosophy of training? Is to grow our strength. Every time we're trying to improve and improve and improve and improve and improve. Same thing with your skills. How do you improve your skills? How do you become more influential? How do you tell your stories in a better way? When you first start, you probably started with your team, and then it becomes more of a managerial stuff, and then it becomes more an executive stuff. You need to have that hunger for learning and say, you know what, I need to learn more about this. I need to take this to the next level. And that process will take you through a process of relearning because what you've learned before, now it's going to be relearned. I had that experience in a lot of companies where people go like, "Oh, I've taken this course. I don't want to take it anymore." Yeah, what else you're going to learn that's new this time that was different from the last time you learned?
As we talk to so many folks that's been laid off, it's really interesting this shift from the company doing it for you and you doing it yourself. You have to be really self driven. You have to really take control of this. There is no learning plan yet that's going to solve all these challenges because it hasn't been built yet. And as I've talked to so many people on this podcast, hindsight is always 2020. And a lot of them described the situation you described earlier, which was I became comfortable. I let the company direct my path versus me picking, here's what I want to go do. And over time, you're kind of in the stream and it's just flowing and flowing. And it unfortunately it flowed to this direction. And for folks that we're talking to, the layoff has actually been this wake up call to rediscover that passion and that autonomy, which is very, very exciting.
What you're describing is something that also happened through the pandemic, where in the past, the way that we learned before and after the pandemic has transformed at a speed that I've never seen it before. I've been working in learning and development for over 20 years, and I can tell you that the way people are learning today has transformed. And it's very important that people take ownership for what they're learning. Go back into when you were to school. You picked your career. Why are you allowing a company telling you what to learn? I mean, they will always tell you what to learn, right? Because that's what they need. But the learning, it's out there. A lot of companies are heavily armed with great learning and development. Do people use it? I don't think so. I know of companies that have these learning days where people should go and learn and they pause for a day and then you go and grab the learning that you want. Do people go to those learnings? It was a constant fight in my company before when I was just helping people go and navigate those, and then people would not access those because they were like too comfortable. Again, that's the word.
Take advantage of the resources you have available. For a lot of these companies, LinkedIn Learning is free. They have a lot of these courses that are available. Take advantage of those, especially now, because those are going to help prepare you for the future to come. Let's talk a little bit about soft skills before we kind of wrap this up here, Steve. You mentioned influence. What are some of the soft skills today that you are looking at as a learning and development consultant for one of the most powerful learning organizations in the world?
Mhm.
What are some of those skills that professionals now should really be investing time in, especially as you look at the next 6 to 12 months?
Strategic thinking would be the first one. I think we're moving more into the space of strategically creating things versus doing things. We spend many years in the doing space. Like, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. Now, think strategically of what needs to be done and what needs to be translated. So, strategic thinking is number one. Number two, it has to do with your ability of adapt. Be agile. We need to transform every day because this is how the environment is working. If you think about the world right now, now we're doing this, tomorrow we're doing a different thing. Agile. but not from the concept of project management, but also apply it to yourself as an individual. How do I adapt? How do I transform? And I don't want people to think about this as, yeah, Stephen, working with ambiguity. We know what that is. We've been in that space. No, 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 no. It doesn't have to do with that. It has to with your ability to transform and not being afraid to pivot when you need to pivot. Layoffs are a great example of that. People in the past, they were in companies for 20, 30 years. They never pivot. They were just comfortable. We need to start learning how to pivot for our health and for our mental health. So that's the other one. Influencing. How do we create a personal brand that can be sold, that people feel excited about that personal brand? It has to do with how do we communicate? How do we tell the story? So influencing, that's why I think it's so important. But those three things I think are crucial right now. It's how do we strategically think? How do we become more agile and adaptable? And how do we influence more so that we can, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving.
I love that you didn't mention AI in any of those three. AI can help us with these things, but to your point around artificial intelligence, what are the parts that are artificial and what are the parts that we can absorb that this becomes our secret sauce as we kind of move into the future? That's fantastic, Steve. Thank you. All
I
right.
want to
So,
add something
yes,
before
please
we
go ahead.
go with artificial intelligence is for us to be able to this is where agile comes into the picture. Is how do we adapt this into our daily jobs and our careers? Don't be afraid of artificial intelligence. It's going to be out there. You're not going to be able to stop it. It's going to happen. So, okay, if it's going to happen, how do I adapt to that? And how do I create value as an individual with artificial intelligence? What's my value added towards the new market using artificial intelligence? I think that's something that people need to start thinking a lot right now. And again, need to start learning a lot about it so that they can become better at it.
So, Steve, I have a question for you, and bear with me. This is new to me. And so, todos despidos son globales y afectan a personas de todo el mundo. ¿Qué mensaje le daría a quienes están pasando por lo mismo en diferentes partes del mundo?
Em, Mantener la calma, todo va a estar bien. Es un proceso, el mundo está cambiando y hay que tener tranquilidad, pero no olvidar la importancia de que nosotros somos los dueños de nuestro destino y nosotros somos los dueños de nuestro desarrollo. Breathe, everything is going to be okay. The world is changing and we are changing with the world. But just keep in mind that you are the owner of your future and that you can transform the future in any way you want. So own that and move forward.
Beautifully put, Steve. Thank you so much. Were there any last minute thoughts that you had for our audience as people think about folks that have been laid off? They're having this experience, they're going through this motion of rediscovering, rebuilding their confidence, and getting out there. And also a growing number of people in our communities that are asking themselves, wow, am I going to be laid off? Curious, what are your words that you would share as we wrap?
Stop waiting for the moment. It's a job and it'll eventually happen. I have an experience that I had with one of the guys that have reported to me. He just kept telling me, like, you're my family, you're my friend. And one of the days I said, it's going to hurt me to say this, but I'm your manager. And the sad part of that is when the business asks me to make a decision out of the business, I have to make it because that's my job. And I don't want you to take that personally because I'm not doing it to you. It's how the jobs market behaves. So stop waiting for the moment for that to happen. Prepare yourself. Always be prepared and own your career path. Own it. Know where you're going to move next because a lot of people feels very comfortable in the corporate environment. Nobody's going to fire me. I've been here for 20 years. Well, you don't know when it's going to happen. That's the reality of corporations. So don't wait for the moment. Don't take it personal. It is just how the job market behaves. It's horrible, yes. It's dehumanizing, yes. Prepare yourself. Use the resources. Use those certifications. Learn about the things that you want to learn. Prepare for the future. To own your pathway and your career path. And then the other thing is, don't wait for the moment. Always be prepared.
Thank you so much for those words. Having it from somebody who is invested in helping people go from present to future through skills is refreshing. Folks, hope you enjoyed this content. Steve was so gracious in giving us his time. We'll put all the information in the show notes. As always, thank you so much for the time. We're doing this so that folks can find inspiration, encouragement, and be able to connect the dots between this layoff experience and where they want to go. Until next time, thank you all and have a great day.